Tentative agreement has been given to a new settlement to the CalPERS Long-Term Care Program class action suit. In this video, I describe the outlines of the proposed settlement and what it likely will mean for policyholders. Who are CalPERS Long-Term Care Program policyholders know that CalPERS backed out of an earlier settlement of the class action lawsuit that was brought by policyholders here in California in response to recent steep increases in rates imposed on the long-term care policyholders. CalPERS was able to back out of the earlier settlement because a fairly large number of their policyholders opted out of the first settlement. They did so because they wanted to retain their long-term care coverage even with the higher premiums. For those of you unfamiliar with how the CalPERS Long-Term Care Program is funded, it is funded entirely by the premiums paid by the policyholders. The Long-Term Care Fund is completely separate from the CalPERS Pension Fund, and it is not guaranteed either by the pension fund or by the state of California. When the CalPERS Long-Term Care Program was first established back in the 1990s, there was very little good actuarial data to determine how costly long-term care eventually would become. As a result, the initial premiums were set far lower than they needed to be to ensure that there would be enough money in the fund to cover the costs of long-term care as the policyholders aged. After the program had been in effect for 20 years or so, it became apparent that the income from premiums and interest on the fund's investments was woefully inadequate to cover the amount of money the fund was paying out to policyholders who were in long-term care. So, in order to keep the long-term care fund solvent, an 85% premium increase was imposed on policyholders in 2012. Policyholders were given the option of paying the increased premium or reducing their level of coverage, even though they initially bought their policies with a promise from CalPERS of inflation protection. And since 2012, there have been additional steep increases in premiums. Needless to say, policyholders who joined the program in the early days, under the assumption that their premiums would increase only modestly over time, were upset by the steep increases imposed by CalPERS to keep the program solvent. That eventually led to the class action suit filed in California courts. One key difference between the first proposed settlement of the CalPERS long-term care class action suit and the proposed second settlement that has received preliminary approval from the court is the way in which policyholders who want to remain in the program are treated. Under the first settlement, those policyholders had to opt out of the settlement entirely. Under the second proposed settlement, policyholders who wish to remain in the long-term care program will receive a cash payment of $1,000 along with a promise that their premiums will not be increased for a full year. The second key difference is the way in which policyholders who want to drop their CalPERS long-term care coverage are treated. Under the first proposed settlement, those policyholders would have received back 100% of the premiums that they had paid in. Under the second proposed settlement, those policyholders who want to drop out of the long-term care program will receive back only 80% of their premiums. As a result, the second proposed settlement, if adopted, would be much less costly than the first settlement would have been. The new proposed settlement would end up costing the long-term care fund about $800 million versus the approximately $2 billion the first settlement would have cost the fund. CalPERS is claiming that the second proposed settlement, if adopted, would keep the fund viable to meet the long-term care needs of those remaining in the program. At this time, early April of 2023, we don't know if the second proposed settlement will receive final approval, since the court has given stakeholders time to make comments and raise objections to the new proposed settlement. However, if the new proposed settlement does receive final approval by the court, the chances that it would be approved by the policyholder look good, primarily because of the way the new settlement treats policyholders who want to remain in the program. However, even if the second proposed settlement is approved, first by the court and then by the policyholders, there remains concerns. First, the program has been closed to new policyholders since 2020, so there is no new money coming into the fund from younger, healthier policyholders. Second, the demographics of those remaining in the program are not favorable. The remaining policyholders as a group are growing older and will be more likely to need long-term care services. This would portend new steep premium increases for the remaining policyholders once the one-year hiatus promised in the second settlement expires. If you have any questions regarding the second proposed settlement, please write them in the comments section for the video. I will attempt to find answers for you. Finally, I want to thank my friend Lawrence Grossman for the yeoman work he has done to call attention to the problems faced by CalPERS long-term care policyholders.